Well, hello, everyone. I know it's a late show. I've just been lollygagging. That's a word. It actually is a word. I know I make up words, but that is actually a word. So we're going to get right into it. And yes, Wayne did repink my hair today. And I do I do have my iPad in front of me. I like to show this other cam here because this is the way now I can read. It's right here. So I can read stuff while we're doing the show. And God, I've got like this one side it's not curling proper. Oh no, it's opposite. Come on now, get under there. Let's do the YouTube stuff and then we will get right into it since this is a late show and I anticipate most people will be watching it after the fact. But I do have a favor to ask. Allegedly, this is getting live streamed on Twitter, but something changed with their API. It like doesn't show up on my timeline. So if you're watching this on Twitter, can you comment just so I see it on my screen and maybe comment with the link to where you are seeing this because I'm still trying to figure it out what's going on with the Twitter API. I'd really appreciate it if you do that. Okay, speaking of Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter at Karen Ann Harlos. And of course, last but not least, and maybe it's not last, I would really appreciate your support on Patreon at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. And of course, super chats and super thanks matter. I'm going to reiterate something I said earlier today on Twitter because I think it's somewhat important. Boy, it's been an evolution being off the LNC and kind of like stepping back. When you're involved in an organization, particularly a political organization, and then you step back, you really do realize that with very rare exception, they're your comrades or whatever you want to call it, they're not your friends. You're transactional allies for a while. Don't get that emotionally invested. That took me a decade to learn. And of course, there are some exceptions to that. And those who are my close friends, they do know who they are, the exceptions. Okay, let's get in now to some party business. It's funny, even though like everyone knows I seriously have stepped away. I still do pay attention to certain things that I care about. So tomorrow I am covering the LNC meeting, which has shaped up that it's going to be a lot spicier than I thought it was. I thought it was just going to be mostly arguing about Austin Martin's AI-fueled delirious resolutions because he's turned the LNC into like a resolution creation committee. But no, there is all kinds of stuff. But one of the more interesting things, so the chair noticed an executive committee meeting for after the LNC meeting. And one of the things on the agenda for the executive committee meeting is to institute suit against the disgraced former chair, Angela McArdle, for the alleged, they didn't use this word, but look it up in a legal dictionary, the alleged embezzlement. Call it misappropriation, whatever you wish. Apparently, they sent 2 demand letters to her. Didn't know that. I knew that they sent one because they mentioned that publicly. I don't get any kind of insider information. But in this motion or notice that the chair gave, he said that they had sent 2. And they're looking to encumber a certain amount of money to institute litigation against her. Let me just say, front load this up front. I'm completely in support of that. And it's not merely a financial decision, though I do think, despite what's coming next on the show, I do think that it will end up settling if suit is filed against her. this is a principled move if the executive committee approves suit. They have not approved it yet. I completely support them approving it, but we'll see. But if you merely look at this from a cost-benefit analysis, you'll miss the greater point. This can't be allowed to slide. And actually, I do think that they're going to spend less ultimately, because I do think she's going to settle. Maybe she won't. So, in response to this, Region 1, do better. But the Region 1 alternate posted, so you can tell he's working, and it's Austin Martin, he's working really closely with McArdle. That's a big problem as it is. There's something I learned in Roberts, and I should have had the quote up. And I have to say, I've ran afoul of this. You learn things over the years, and I ran afoul of it. And that is, and it's probably one reason why I would, anyone getting onto the LNC, I think this is something, or anybody, it's harder in a political organization, but you really need to second guess isn't the right word, but examine yourself. But there's a principle that I never even saw in there, that basically once the body makes a decision, it's not that you can't disagree, but there's a certain limit, I guess. And you have to really examine yourself to see if you are keeping faith with the board. So I have to say, me resigning in July was actually the best thing. Even though I didn't do it because of that, it's the best thing. And thank you, Winrich. I'm going to put this up here. I really appreciate the super chat. And yeah, it is best to keep at arm's length. And let me say something. There's nothing wrong with having transactional allies. There really is nothing wrong with that. It's on me. It's on me for thinking the relationship was more than it was with some people. I'm not criticizing them. This is like a hard-fought self-realization that I had to come to. But in any event, so I do hope they vote to file suit. Listen, I'm putting comments up today, so those of you who are here watching late with me, get your comments in. In any event, Austin Martin fired back at Steve. Steve's the chair of the LP. And let me tell you something. Steve needs to get control over the absolute lack of decorum on the LNC list. You know, they're all going after Bill Redpath. I think everyone knows I'm very fond of Bill Redpath. You go after Bill, sorry, I'll come after you. And, you know, they call him names and whatever. But they're also showing utter disrespect to Steve in the official business. Now, most of you know, I'm not a Nikela fan. But as chair, he deserves respect when he's in his position as chair. You don't call him Steve-O on the LNC list. So, but Austin Martin said, oh, I can't believe basically we're thinking of filing suit against her, because we're not pursuing a certain trademark case. And that, I'm not going to say he's right, because I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive, but they do need to discuss, man, my nails really go with this shirt. I didn't realize that. But they do need to move forward with the trademark case. But that's an entirely separate issue. And you're correct, Rinrich, that is what they're calling him Fed. And that's just ridiculous. Bill's given so much to this party. I forgot where I was going. So yeah, the disrespect. Steve needs to get that under control. So the Region 1 alternate's like, oh, I can't believe we're doing this. And by the way, Angela McArdle has an attorney, so she lawyered up. And her attorney did respond to one of these demand letters, and he posted the response. Now, Steve is correct. This is confidential. It's not confidential to me. I'm not in the LNC. Once it's been made public, that's the fault of Austin Martin. I can discuss it freely. But he's already under censure for sharing attorney-client items. That's also on the agenda for tomorrow. Then he posts this letter from McArdle's attorney, which is, whether we like it or not in the party, should be confidential. But it's not anymore, and that's what we're going to go over. But I feel, I don't want to even say vindicated, because I don't ever want to be vindicated by McArdle. But something is said in this letter that's correct, in my opinion. That doesn't exonerate McArdle. But what I've said all along, she's not the only one who did wrong. And the alleged embezzlement is not the only thing wrong. You all know my opinion is that the JFC is of questionable legality, and I want to be more precise with that. The RFAIs, which is the request for additional information that the LNC got from the FEC, weren't directed toward the JFC qua JFC, because there are people who will tell you on the face of it whether or not it was unprincipled or against our bylaws, which I think it was, and that the JC screwed that up, that it is technically illegal. I'll remind you that that election law attorney that was quoted in the Boston Globe, who does this for a living, said it was a very aggressive interpretation of federal election campaign finance law. And he said, let's just say it's not clearly legal. That shouldn't inspire a lot of confidence. But where I think it is clearly illegal is in the coordinated spending. So downstream. Just wanted to get that out. Of course, none of this suit would have anything to do with that, because the LNC is not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So it's just about the alleged embezzlement. And we're going to look up the definition of embezzlement, because that's really important here. Actually, let's do that right now, because this will become important in going over this attorney letter. Embezzlement definition. Okay, well, they have it as theft or misappropriation. Misappropriation is the right word here. Of funds placed in one's trust. So, okay. That's a good definition for our purposes. But what I want to get into is that in the LNC, Angela's not the only one who did wrong. Now, there had been a bunch of resignations since then, so who knows? There's not very many people left who were there at that time. But I've had questions and criticisms from the beginning against the Region 4 Representative Meredith Hayes. Meredith Hayes, was it last week, on an LP Ally stream, threatened to sue me for bringing this up. You're allowed to bring things up that are factual. I didn't say any conclusions from what she said. We're going to pull up what Meredith had said, because it gets referenced in this attorney letter. And it's to me, back when this whole thing went down with Angela, she should have resigned. Now that there's an attorney letter, which is referencing what I believe is her severe breach of fiduciary duty to the LNC, though the attorney letter accuses her of more than that, I've never accused her of more than that. I have just said that she breached duty to the LNC. And I think that is objectively true. Or if you're going into the realm of opinion, it's a well-founded opinion, even if others may disagree. So let me go to this next screen here. Okay. So here is a screenshot. So after they started, let me get this Google screen down from the back here. Okay, because that was distracting. Okay. After they started investigating Angela shot a message. I don't know if this is in Signal, wherever, some kind of text message to Meredith saying, I don't know if there's a way to walk back a Rule 1.7 violation. If you don't know what a Rule 1.7 violation is, Angela is citing American Bar Association rules. 1.7 has to do with confidences and things you owe your client. Actually, let's pull Google back up and let's let me look up what a Rule 1.7 violation actually is. But I want to make it clear, I have zero opinion as to whether there's a Rule 1.7 violation. It's not my business. That's between her and Angela. This AI overview will be fine. A Rule 1.7 violation occurs when a lawyer represents a client with a concurrent conflict of interest directly adversing another client or materially limiting representation due to other duties or personal interest. So it's a conflict of interest thing, but having to do with the practice of law. I don't care about that. Again, that's between, I don't want to say I don't care. I obviously work in the law. What I mean by I don't care is I'm not making any kind of allegations with that. Again, that's between her and Meredith. But obviously, Angela thinks here that there was a Rule 1.7 violation. She says, I don't know how to walk back a Rule 1.7 violation that has spiraled this far out of control, but I'm open to hear about it. I will have to rule the IC motion out of order. Maybe you want to tell people first. So Angela was still chair, and it was when they were making the motion to remove her, basically, to form an investigatory committee to remove her. And what Angela posted is a screenshot from an older conversation she had with Meredith. I don't know how old this conversation is. Oh, there's a date on there. I don't think that dates from the original conversation, though. Whenever, at some point in the past, you can see Meredith said to Angela, just consider you and me to have a quasi-attorney-client relationship. I will keep all confidences as if you were my client. Not even Adrian gets to know. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. With everything that we know that Angela was doing, at some point in the past, Meredith had said to her, basically, Meredith says there's a greater context that can cure this. She's never produced it. So all we can go by what is here. But in some context, she said to Angela, why don't, we can talk. I won't tell anyone. It's like I'm your attorney. We will have that level of confidence. Now let that sink in. Now, could this have been about something personal? Like Angela was having a contractual dispute with somebody painting her house? It's possible. But the fact that Angela sent her this text, not insinuating, outright claiming there's a Rule 1.7 violation in the context of the LNC doesn't make it likely. And, of course, Angela didn't produce the whole conversation with Meredith. I would like to see the whole conversation. But she's sending this to Meredith. So she doesn't need to produce the whole conversation because Meredith should already know. However, later on, when Angela was saying everyone was prejudiced and stuff like that, she should have produced the whole thing. But we do have something tantalizing here in this screenshot. Look up to where it's cut off. And the last two words, which are from Meredith, protect you. So whatever that we can't see ends with protect you. Angela says, okay, thank you. And then Meredith goes, yeah, it'll be just like I'm your lawyer. It'll be a quasi attorney-client relationship. No one on the LNC can ethically promise that to anyone else on the LNC if it has to do potentially with things that touch upon the LNC. I don't care about bar rules. I am talking here about our fiduciary duties as an LNC member. I can tell you, I've had LNC members come to me in the past and say something like, can I tell you something and you'll keep it secret? And I'll tell you what I've always said to them. Sure, unless I have an ethical obligation to disclose it. So if they came to me and were like, oh, so-and-so is doing something, illegal or whatever. No, I could never promise to keep that secret. Never. And I have said that so many times during my times that I was on the LNC. So here's Natalie. I have no idea. But me just bringing this up. So last week on LP Allies, Meredith was going on about the alleged data breach that they had. And I commented, perhaps you should be more concerned about the quasi-attorney-client privilege that you promised McArdle. And she's like, I'll sue you, whatever. Go ahead. Go ahead, Meredith. Because there's documentation here. If there's a fuller context, give it to me. I'm not claiming you did anything professionally wrong with your, I don't care. I'm talking about the LNC. And it certainly was wrong when it came to the LNC, unless this was about some personal thing. Even then, I don't think anyone on the LNC should be the attorney for anyone else on the LNC. But here, in context, everything I'm saying is certainly reasonably supported. Now, let's get to Angela's attorney letter. We had to give this as a context. Actually, before we do that, I want to show you the LNC policy manual. I need to give you a little bit more background for those of you who've forgotten or hadn't been following along about the alleged embezzlement. So Austin Padgett is the father of Angela's child. He's her domestic partner. For all intents and purposes, they're married. They're not legally married, like they didn't go and get the state marriage license, but that's not unusual for libertarians. So I would consider them married, even though the state wouldn't. I would consider them married, but they own a home together. I think they're both on the title. I don't know, don't care. They live together. They have a child together. Whatever. So Angela, without first getting approval from the LNC, had hired Austin Padgett to be a fundraiser for the party. So she hired to pay him. Then asked for permission later when it came up that under DC law, you probably need to ask for permission, whatever. I can tell you in discussions with other LNC members, no one was happy about it. But it had already been done. And everyone, well, I'm not going to say everyone, but I certainly was on this and I was wrong. Nearly everyone was kind of like, well, it's only for 3 months. Let's just get these 3 months over with and move on. He's already hired, whatever. And he allegedly, towards the end of those 3 months, brought in a big donor. However, it turns out after the fact that this donor tended to give the maximum amount to the party every year at that around that time anyway. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he did convince the donor. Then when Austin's time was nearly up, she's like, and she had told us at the beginning, oh, I'm looking for somebody else. This is just for 3 months. Then at the end of the 3 months, of course, she didn't find anyone else. And she's like, listen, a fundraiser can't really, you know, in the first 3 months, you're just developing your contacts. But we need him for another 3 months. We reluctantly agreed, but we agreed conditioned, well, I don't want to say conditioned, but we agreed while passing a policy manual amendment so that this could not happen again. I moved this policy manual amendment. I wrote this policy manual amendment. It's a tiny bit different right now because it's been amended since, but this is what we're going to look at next because this is really important. This is probably kind of small, and well, it's not probably kind of small. It is really small. I want to look at it on my well, we're not going to. I'm going to try to read it here. So let me find it right here. It is the second paragraph from the bottom. Any proposed contracts, agreements, or transactions for financial remuneration with a closely related party, including but not limited to legal relative, domestic partner, there's a reason why that word was used, business associate, paramour, friend wasn't there before, to a sitting LNC member or staff member shall be disclosed to the LNC prior to execution and shall be approved by a 2/3 vote, excluding the conflicted parties. This was so that this couldn't happen again. Angela voted for this policy manual amendment, if I remember correctly. She certainly didn't vote no. She might have abstained from the vote because her vote wouldn't make a difference, as chairs often do. I can't recall that, but I know she was amenable to it. And Austin Padgett's contract expired, but like within a couple days of it expiring, and during this time, he formed a shell corporation called Freedom Calls. That was his corporation. They had like bought an offshore, it wasn't Indian call center, it was Filipino, I think, call center, but an offshore call center. And they started this business, but it was owned by Austin Padgett. She executed a contract right after Austin's other contract expired with Freedom Calls, which is clearly in opposition to this policy manual amendment. And it was done so that he could continue to get paid, even though she knew that the LNC would not approve it. And Austin Padgett, from his time when he was a fundraiser, a disclosed fundraiser to the LNC, he was on her conflict of interest disclosures. At some point in the midst of, while Freedom Calls still had a contract with the LNC that she executed, that no one knew he owned that company, she instructed me to take Austin Padgett off of her disclosed conflicts of interest. So this was really all quite deliberate. Something that you will notice here, it doesn't say any proposed contracts with a domestic partner need to be disclosed unless they're actually doing work or unless the LNC actually gets benefit from it. It's obvious that this is an anti-nepotism clause. Now, during that period of time, and I'm not claiming that Meredith Hayes knew, but during that period of time when she was promising Angela quasi-attorney-client privilege, this contract was going on. I want to know what the rest of that discussion was. What was she saying to Angela that she needed to protect her from? Because remember, let's remember that right here. Look right up at the top of that black square. It says protect you. What was that all about? I want to know. Now let's go to Angela's attorney's letter. I want to get this. Nope, that's not it. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. So it's a Maryland law firm because it's the DC area. And this was January 5th, so almost 2 months ago. Okay, we're going to go through this, and I'm reading it from my iPad in the front here. Please be advised that this law firm has been retained to represent Angela McArdle. Okay. And all matters relating to her former affiliation with the Libertarian National Committee as LNC chair. I'm in receipt of your letter dated December 5th. Now, I'm wondering if that's the first or the second letter. I could probably go back to the minutes and find out. Demanding restitution of $49,600. That's how much Freedom Calls got paid in their contract. But notice that isn't asking for restitution of, I don't know, the swing vote strategist thing of the JFC that she shoved through and then personally benefited from. But okay. In funds that McArdle allegedly fraudulently caused the LNC to pay to Freedom Calls while, quote unquote, actively concealing, she was actively concealing, that Freedom Calls was formed by McArdle's domestic partner. He's reviewed the investigatory report as well as additional documents provided by McArdle. Now notice, while the investigation was ongoing, McArdle refused to cooperate. So any kind of stuff she's bringing up after the fact, she could have brought this up in the beginning. In any event, including correspondence between Meredith Hayes and various LNC members relating to the report and allegations against McArdle. See correspondence attached here too as attachment A. I don't have attachment A. I would ask someone on the LNC for attachment A, but this letter should have never been disclosed to begin with. And I don't ask people on the LNC for confidential information. So we're going to be able to intuit. There's probably more to attachment A. I bet you that screenshot I showed you was part of it, but we don't know everything that was part of attachment A. But just judging from this, where it says between Meredith Hayes and various LNC members, part of this is a nothing burger, which we'll get to in his letter. And the other part is that screenshot I showed you, which I don't think is a nothing burger. But I'll just tell you, those of you who wanted to see Angela held to account, if she's not, one big reason is Meredith Hayes. That's who you can thank, because that's not the whole controversy in this letter, but it certainly is a controversy in this letter. And Elizabeth Miller, sure. Let me stick this. Hold on. I lose my mouse all the time because I got two screens here. Yeah, my phone number is really, really public, or you could email me. I'd be more than happy to give you whatever information you'd like. Okay, so the other correspondence I think he's referring to here, he's going to get to it again. Meredith was, okay, let me tell you a problem. The LNC had this secret signal chat. And when I say secret, I mean, people are allowed to have their own signal chats, but I know from past experience, those things always go very wrong. And not everyone from the LNC was invited to it. It was like a secret little club. I wasn't in it, by the way. Miss you too, Liz. And here, Meredith was joking in that group that she was ghostwriting the Special Investigatory Committee report. Do I think Meredith ghost wrote that report? No, I don't. I don't like Meredith. this is totally against my self-interest to like say, no, I think something that's said about her here isn't true. I think she was joking. Meredith is very insecure. She shouldn't be. She's really smart, and smart people can do dumb things, but whatever. She is. So she often puffs up and like says all these things that like to act tough that aren't correct. It's shit talking, I guess we would call it. But no, I don't believe Meredith Ghost wrote that report. So I think that's part of what attachment A is. He says, I find absolutely, I'm assuming it's a he, I didn't see the signature line on this. I find absolutely no basis for the LNC to demand restitution and funds that McArdle allegedly caused the LNC to pay freedom calls. Specifically, neither the letter nor the report dispute the fact that Freedom Calls provided services to the LNC for which it was paid. That is not the point. That is not the point. There was a rule passed against it that didn't say, well, unless they actually provide services, that she purposely circumvented. And the report does kind of dispute that services were required. So if I hired you, to use my prior example, to come paint my house, and you brought a little like makeup brush and you did a little square inch out of a big house, well, did you provide services? I mean, technically, yes. But did you really? Really? No, you didn't. And the SIC report shows that they did, for whatever call center work was performed, it was well below industry standards, and it was co-opted to make calls for the Mises Caucus in California. Okay, let's go to the next page. I need to go to the next page on my I'm reading the last sentence on that first page first. The report contains evidence that Freedom Calls actually performed legitimate call center and outreach services for the LNC, yeah, and the Mises Caucus, right? Stating that they made at least 13,738 fundraising calls over the course of 366 days and raised virtually nothing. And there were all kinds of other problems. You can read the special investigatory report. The report contains no evidence that suggests embezzlement. Yes, it does. The very fact that she actively concealed that she rehired Austin Padgett under a shell corporation, circumventing the LNC's rules. Remember what we said that embezzlement is. It's the misappropriation of funds that you were able to obtain access to because of a position of trust. This is almost like, you hear these stories a lot, and I've heard them even in the party over the years, where you have county treasurers, state treasurers who like they're running into a bind, you know, so they borrow $500 from the party account to pay their rent, and then they pay it back the next day, but they pay back $600, and they're like, no harm, no foul, you actually made money. No, it's still theft. This is still embezzlement. The LNC, no matter what the return was, and it was a bad return, but even if it was a great return, they had a rule prohibiting, without a certain high threshold vote, a nepotism hire. She buries this. And instead, the restitution demand appears to be based on the report's highly subjective, unilateral finding that the LNC did not obtain fair market value for the funds it paid. That is not what it's based upon. That's part of it. But let's say she hired a company owned and ran by somebody completely unrelated to her. Would there have been an investigatory committee report about it? No. LNC chairs, executive directors, and LNCs make poor financial decisions all the time. It's the fact that her household personally benefited from it. And the fact that the LNC didn't benefit at all is just an added layer. Not going to let this get obscured. At the outset, it appears that the report is of questionable validity. We've been through this a million times. While the report states that it was prepared by an independent special investigatory committee, it appears that it was, in fact, ghostwritten by Ms. Hayes. No, I don't believe that. Who at one time claimed to be in a quasi-attorney-client relationship with Ms. McArdle, and by ghostwriting the report has potentially violated ethics rules governing attorney conduct. Now, I do not agree with this attorney. I don't believe she ghost wrote the report. But I don't think the attorney is crazy to think that, because she did kind of suggest that in these signal groups. I just know her well enough that I took that completely as like a brag, that she wasn't really ghost writing it. And I know that people on the committee, they're perfectly competent to write the report. I don't believe she ghost wrote it. But he says so, and says because of the quote-unquote quasi-attorney-client relationship, that would violate ethical rules. How did he word it? Governing attorney conduct. Again, that's not my business. I'm more concerned about governing LNC member conduct. But I'll tell you some things I know. I can't say I know for a fact, but I'm relatively certain of. The SIC was taking information from all LNC members. I submitted a bunch of information to them. I reasonably think Meredith probably did. Would that be an issue here? I certainly think so. And he didn't bring up what I think is a bigger issue. And I don't know if Angela reviewed this letter, which is the whole reason she texted Meredith to begin with, is that Meredith was one of the leaders of this charge to convince McArdle to resign. Now, I think that was the right thing to do. But allegedly, McArdle was promised by various people. Don't know if it's true, but she's alleged that she was promised. And I believe she alleged Hayes was one of the people who promised this. And I think she also said Kathy Yanuskavich was, that if she resigned, that would be the end of it. That they wouldn't look into this further, just go peacefully and we'll leave you alone. Now, that's a promise that no one can make, but it's especially problematic because I think on the original investigatory committee, like Meredith was going to be on it. But in any event, she recused from a bunch of these votes, but she never recused saying, I have a conflict of interest. I can't vote on this. She recused saying, Angela has threatened to sue me, so I can't vote on it. This is just all kinds of problematic. And anyone who works in law can see that this is all kinds of problematic. And anyone who's been in fiduciary boards can see this is all kinds of problematic. Again, the professional stuff, that's between her and Angela, not my business. And then it goes on to say the legal conclusions in the report are invalid or unsupported by the DC Code regulations or the LNC policies. Dude, I wrote that policy. Sorry, you're wrong. This is not a dig against that attorney. He's zealously representing his client as he's required to do. So quoting the DC Code, it's saying that a contract won't be void or voidable even if merely because there's a related party. But it talks about a meeting of the board of directors to authorize that transaction. He bolds the part that doesn't have anything to do with it. It wasn't authorized, and the LNC had a procedure in place to authorize it. Actively hiding that it's with someone who has a financial stake. Oh my goodness. And it says, well, she wasn't a director or hold a similar position in Freedom Calls. It was owned by her domestic partner. The funds went directly into her household. And it says the report identifies a number of LNC policies that it allegedly violated. None of the policies in the report contain any provision requiring her to personally reimburse the LNC. Oh my God. Way to miss the point. Each policy isn't going to say the repercussions if you violate it. Our policies there's a policy against sexual harassment. So say a female LNC member, or even a male, it doesn't really matter. An LNC member goes to an LNC meeting and another LNC member gropes them up in the hallway. Our policy doesn't say if they do that, they could get reported to the police. Does that mean that that LNC member can't get reported for sexual assault? No. These are our financial policies, and if you violate them and there is legal recourse, of course you can be gone against. That is just a prima facie bad argument. But again, he's zealously representing his claim. And it says, this appears to be brought in an attempt to harass or intimidate McArdle. After her behavior on the LNC, that's quite rich, but I don't think this guy knows that. He says, I'm prepared to defend her in a court of law, and I'm certain, given the tenuous nature of the allegations and the questionable validity of the report, any case is likely to be dismissed. No, it isn't. I think this guy, if suit is filed, will try to get the case dismissed, and if it isn't dismissed, it's going to settle. I would tell the LNC not to settle. We need discovery. But, that's up to them. Additionally, any legal action against her will result in counterclaims, including but not limited to defamation. Somebody look up that that would get, there isn't a snowball's chance on that. And intentional infliction of emotional distress, again, that is really, really rich. And then there's a non-spoliation paragraph. Let me go to the next page. If you don't know what, that's the last paragraph. If you don't know what non-spoliation is, that's basically, you're on notice to not destroy any evidence. So they're like, keep all the emails that you have and stuff like that. That's really, really typical. So tomorrow they're going to have the vote on this. We will see if they're intimidated. They had this letter though, just getting it yesterday. So when Steve made that motion or noticed that motion, he was already aware of this letter. So I assume whatever attorney, and there's the names on the LNC list. And I lost my mouse cursor again. Where is it? There it is. Okay, whatever. Again, the names on the LNC list, that attorney's taken a look at it and is confident or whatever. But that whole thing, what promising the quasi-attorney-client privilege, that's going to be an issue in this case. I don't think the attorney in the letter made as big of an issue of it on a fiduciary setting. Again, not getting into any Rule 1.7. I don't think he made as big of a deal of it that he could have. But it's going to be. The LNC right now should be asking for Meredith Hayes' resignation. It's so close to convention, she should just do it. Region 4 has already elected a new representative. They just don't take office until close of convention. But if Meredith were to resign, that's probably, because Region 4 is just California, they would probably have the person elected at convention just start their term early. But I've been saying this all along. that it's a problem. This is a problem. You don't promise confidences like that. And particularly, you know, I get being trusting, being somewhat naive or whatever. But this happened during a point of time after there was the whole Colorado controversy with RFK Jr. There was the whole controversy with McArdle soft endorsing Trump. There was the whole controversy already where I sent a whistleblower email to LNC Council. Nobody should have been so naive. Even if you didn't think she did anything wrong, you knew she was already under a cloud of suspicion for various things. You don't put yourself in the position of going, I'll protect you, or whatever that protect you was about. Just think of me like I'm your lawyer. Anyone excusing that on a fiduciary duty level? I'm probably going to mispronounce this because I'm going back to my childhood, and hopefully my dad didn't say something that was filthy and told me it meant something else. But he used to say, "Karanats in the gaba," meaning you got nuts and bolts in your head. Now, maybe it doesn't mean that's what my dad told me. He'd always be like, "You got karanats in the gaba." Yeah, my dad's family was Italian. All right. Now, hopefully that gave you a little bit of background you didn't have before. And Meredith, go ahead. Sue me for bringing it up. I'm just reading texts and asking what they're about. I'm not doing a Candace Owens where I'm going to say you made gang signs when you were in preschool. I'm asking a reasonable question about a text that any reasonable person would have concerns about. Go ahead. Just like with the LNC's suit, discovery would be great. Now, of course, if Meredith did, just good common sense, you try to dismiss it. But if it doesn't get dismissed, I get to depose you, sweetheart, and McArdle. So I'd love to find out what I could. Be making threats like that. All right. That is it for this evening. Join me tomorrow. We're going to cover the LNC meeting. And I expect it will be interesting. So have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business.